Chilly evening in Los Angeles, the city lights flickering like distant stars. Sandra Bullock had just stepped out of a small cafe on Sunset Boulevard, adjusting the scarf around her neck. She had been enjoying a quiet coffee, escaping the usual Hollywood chaos. Just as she was about to get into her car, a small, shivering voice called out to her. "Ma'am, do you have $1?" Sandra turned to see a young boy, no older than 10, dressed in tattered clothes. His eyes were wide, innocent, yet filled with the kind of exhaustion no child should ever carry. Sandra's heart clenched. She had met plenty of people asking for money in L.A., but there was something about this boy. The way he stood there, rubbing his arms for warmth, that made her stop. She reached into her purse, about to pull out a bill, when she noticed a familiar figure standing a few feet away, watching the exchange. Keanu Reeves. He had been sitting at an outdoor table just inside the cafe, dressed simply in jeans and a jacket, sipping his coffee in solitude. He had witnessed the whole scene unfold. Before Sandra could hand the boy the $1, Keanu stood up and walked over. "How about we do something better than $1, he said in his calm, thoughtful voice. The boy looked up at him, unsure of what he meant. Keanu knelt in front of him. "Are you hungry?" The boy hesitated, then nodded. Keanu stood up and smiled. "All right then. Come inside. We're going to have dinner together." Sandra, still holding the bill in her hand, was taken aback. Keanu wasn't just giving the boy money, he was offering kindness, dignity, and respect. The three of them walked back into the cafe, where Keanu ordered a hot meal for the boy, making sure he had enough to take with him. As they sat down, Sandra finally spoke. "That was incredible, Keanu." Keanu just shrugged, a small smile on his face. "I don't think $1 would change his life, but maybe a meal, a little warmth, and someone who cares can make a difference." Sandra looked at the boy, now eating with wide, grateful eyes. Inside the cafe, people watched in stunned silence, recognizing the famous actors but, more importantly, witnessing an act of kindness that Hollywood rarely showcased. That night, Keanu Reeves reminded everyone that true generosity isn't about how much you give. It's about how much you care. And Sandra Bullock? She knew, once again, why she had always admired him. "Would you like me to add anything more to the story?" Homeless kid asks Sandra Bullock for $1. Keanu Reeves watching in front, and his response shocks everyone inside. Part 2. The boy ate hungrily, barely pausing between bites. Keanu and Sandra watched him in silence, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. After finishing his food, the boy wiped his mouth with the sleeve of his oversized hoodie. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu leaned in. "What's your name, kid?" The boy hesitated for a moment, as if afraid to share too much. "Jace," he finally answered. Sandra smiled warmly. "Nice to meet you, Jace. Where's your family?" Jace lowered his gaze, playing with the edge of his hoodie. "Gone," he muttered. "My mom, she got sick last year. I was staying with my uncle, but he—" The boy trailed off, shaking his head. Sandra felt her chest tighten. No child should ever have to tell a story like this. Keanu's expression darkened for a second, but then he took a deep breath. "Listen, Jace, you shouldn't be out here alone. Do you have a place to sleep tonight?" Jace shook his head. "Sometimes I sleep at the bus stop, sometimes in an alley behind the grocery store. It's safe there." Safe? The idea of a 10-year-old thinking an alley was safe made Sandra's stomach turn. Keanu glanced at Sandra. It was that unspoken look, the one that meant they were about to do something big. Sandra exhaled. "Okay," she said firmly. "We can't leave you out here." Jace's eyes widened. "You're not going to call the cops, are you?" Keanu shook his head. "No cops, but we are going to help you. I know a place, a shelter for kids like you. It's clean, safe, and they have people who can help you get back on your feet." Jace hesitated. "I don't want to go to a foster home." Keanu leaned forward. "No one's forcing you to do anything, Jace, but you deserve a bed, a warm place. You don't have to be alone." The boy studied Keanu's face, as if searching for deception. Finding none, he finally gave a small nod. Sandra reached for her phone. "I know someone who works with a great organization. They'll take care of you." As she made the call, Keanu placed a gentle hand on Jace's shoulder. "You're going to be okay, kid." For the first time, Jace smiled. A real, genuine smile. Within an hour, a kind social worker arrived, someone Keanu had personally worked with before. As Jace got into the car, he turned back one last time. "Thank you," he said. Both of you. Keanu smiled. Take care of yourself, Jace. Sandra watched as the car pulled away, then turned to Keanu. You really are one of a kind, you know that? Keanu chuckled. Nah, I just believe in doing the right thing when I can. Sandra shook her head, grinning. You're impossible. The two of them stood there for a moment under the glow of the streetlights. Somewhere in the distance, the city moved on, unaware of the small act of kindness that had just taken place. But for Jace, everything had changed. And for Keanu and Sandra, it was just another reminder that sometimes being human was the greatest role of all. The end. How's that? Want me to add more? Hash. Homeless kid asks Sandra Bullock for $1. Keanu Reeves watching in front, and his response shocks everyone inside. Part 3. Days passed, and life in Hollywood moved on, but Sandra Bullock couldn't stop thinking about Jace. She found herself wondering how he was doing, whether he was safe, and if he was finally getting the care he needed. Then, one afternoon, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? Miss Bullock, a warm, female voice said. This is Lisa from the children's shelter. I just wanted to update you about Jace. Sandra immediately sat up. Is he okay? Lisa chuckled. More than okay. I thought you and Mr. Reeves might want to know. He's doing amazing. He was quiet at first, but after a few days he started opening up. He's been drawing a lot. Turns out he's got a real talent for art. Sandra smiled. That's incredible. That's not all, Lisa continued. A local artist visited the shelter yesterday and saw Jace's sketches. He was so impressed that he's offered to mentor him. Sandra covered her mouth, her heart swelling. She knew Jace had been through so much, but now, for the first time, he had a future to look forward to. Does Keanu know? Sandra asked. Not yet, Lisa replied. I was hoping you could tell him. Sandra didn't waste a second. She grabbed her phone and dialed Keanu's number. Hey, Sandy, he answered, his usual calm voice on the line. You're not going to believe this, she said, grinning. Jace, the kid from the cafe, he's safe, and he's an artist. Keanu was silent for a moment. Then in a soft, proud voice he said, That's amazing. Sandra took a deep breath. I was thinking, maybe we should visit him. What do you say? Keanu chuckled. I was about to suggest the same thing. A visit to remember. That evening, Sandra and Keanu arrived at the shelter, greeted warmly by Lisa. She led them to the common area, where Jace sat at a table, a sketchbook in front of him. He looked up, and when he saw them, his eyes widened. You came back. Keanu smiled. Of course. Sandra sat beside him, glancing at the sketchbook. Her breath caught. Jace had drawn a stunningly detailed picture of that night. The cafe, the table, Keanu kneeling beside him, and Sandra standing with $1 in her hand. This is incredible, Sandra whispered. Jace, you have a gift. Jace blushed. It's just something I like to do. Keanu leaned in. No, kid, this is more than just a hobby. You're an artist. Jace beamed, something in his posture changing like he was starting to believe it himself. As they talked, Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook. I brought you something, he said, handing it to Jace. Jace opened it, eyes widening. Inside were blank pages, an expensive professional quality sketchbook. For your next masterpiece, Keanu said with a wink. Jace looked at him, then at Sandra, his eyes glassy with emotion. Thank you, he whispered. For everything. Sandra squeezed his shoulder. Just promise us one thing. Jace tilted his head. What? Keanu grinned. Keep drawing. Jace nodded, clutching the sketchbook like it was the most valuable thing in the world. As Sandra and Keanu walked back to their car, the night air was crisp, but their hearts were warm. You know, Sandra said, glancing at Keanu, I think we just met someone really special. Keanu smiled. Yeah, and something tells me we'll be seeing his name in an art gallery one day. They both looked back at the shelter one last time. Some acts of kindness are small, others change lives. And for Jace, that night at the cafe wasn't just a meal, it was the beginning of a brand new future. The end, or just the beginning. I hope you like this continuation. Let me know if you want to expand it further. Homeless kid asks Sandra Bullock for $1. Keanu Reeves watching in front, and his response shocks everyone inside. Part 4. A few weeks passed and life carried on. Sandra was back on set filming her latest movie and Keanu was traveling for a project. But neither of them forgot about Jace. One evening, while Sandra was reading through scripts at home, her phone buzzed again. It was Lisa from the shelter. "Hey, Lisa, how's our little artist doing?" Sandra asked, smiling. Lisa's voice was filled with excitement. "That's why I'm calling. Jace's mentor, the artist I told you about. He entered one of Jace's sketches into a local art competition." Sandra's eyes widened. "No way. And guess what?" Lisa continued. "He won." Sandra nearly dropped her phone. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. The organizers want to feature his artwork in an exhibition next week. I thought you and Mr. Reeves might want to be there." Sandra grinned. "Oh, you can count on it." The art exhibition. The night of the exhibition, Sandra and Keanu arrived at the upscale gallery in downtown LA. The place was buzzing with art lovers, critics, and collectors. The thought of Jace, just a few weeks ago living on the streets, now having his work displayed in a gallery brought a lump to Sandra's throat. They spotted Jace standing near a large frame, dressed in a clean button-up shirt, looking both nervous and proud. When he saw them, his face lit up. "You guys came," Jace beamed. Keanu ruffled his hair. "Of course, kid, wouldn't miss it." Sandra looked at the framed drawing. It was breathtaking, a black and white sketch capturing that very moment outside the cafe when Keanu had knelt in front of Jace and offered to help. A small plaque beneath the drawing read, "Kindness, by Jace Miller." Sandra felt her throat tighten. "Jace, this is beautiful." A well-dressed man approached, holding a clipboard. "Are you the artist's guests?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah, we're just friends." The man smiled. "Well, you'll be happy to know that this piece has already been sold." Jace's eyes went wide. "Wait, someone bought it." The man nodded. "For $10,000. Sandra gasped. Jace looked like he was about to faint. $10,000? "That's right," the man said, "and the buyer left a note for you." He handed Jace a small envelope. With shaking hands, Jace opened it and read the message inside. His lips quivered as he whispered the words aloud. "A masterpiece deserves a home. Keep drawing, kid. K.R." Jace slowly looked up at Keanu, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "You bought it?" Keanu smiled softly. "I wanted the first piece of art you ever sold to belong to someone who believes in you." Jace's hands tightened around the note. Then, in a moment that surprised everyone, he lunged forward and hugged Keanu tightly. "Thank you," Jace choked out. Keanu held the boy for a second, then gently patted his back. "No, kid. Thank you for reminding us all how powerful art and kindness can be." Sandra wiped away a tear. "Okay, I'm officially an emotional mess." The three of them stood there, surrounded by flashing cameras and murmuring crowds. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Jace had found a new home, not in a house, but in the hearts of the two people who refused to let him be forgotten. And as for Keanu and Sandra, they had just played the most meaningful roles of their lives. The end. How's that for a touching ending? Or do you want even more?